My brother stood up in that conference room and said I was mentally unfit to manage any financial decisions. I didn't say a word. Not one. I just sat there with my hands folded on the table, watching him. He was wearing the navy blazer he always wore when he wanted to look like he had things under control. He never did, but he was very, very good at performing confidence for an audience, and he had an audience that day. My mother was there, my aunt, his attorney, a man named Whitfield who smelled like cigarettes and billed $400 an hour. The estate mediator, a woman named Ms. Okafor, sat at the head of the table with a yellow legal pad and a pen she hadn't used yet, and me. Just me, no attorney, no folder, no nothing. Just a glass of water I hadn't touched. My brother, I'll call him what he called himself in that room, the responsible party, had prepared for this moment for months. I know that now. At the time, I just thought he was being his usual self. Loud, certain, completely unable to imagine a world where he wasn't the smartest person in the room. His name is Dominic. He's 41. He manages a mid-sized logistics company in Phoenix that our father helped him fund 12 years ago. He drives a new truck every 2 years and considers that a personality trait. He has never once asked me how I was doing unless he needed something. I'm 32. My name is Iris, and for the past 4 years, I've been a silent partner in a real estate investment firm that owns 14 commercial properties across 3 states. Nobody in my family knows that. Not my mother, not my aunt, not Dominic. They think I'm a freelance graphic designer who got lucky with a couple of client contracts. That's the version of me they decided on a long time ago, and I stopped correcting them. Let me back up. My father died 11 months before that conference room. Pancreatic cancer, fast and brutal, the way it usually goes. He was 68. He had built a modest amount of wealth over his lifetime. A paid-off house in Scottsdale, a commercial property on the east side of the city, a brokerage account, and a life insurance policy. Not generational wealth, but enough to matter, enough to fight over. He had a will. He'd had it updated 3 years before he died. In it, he split his estate evenly between me and Dominic. The house would be sold, proceeds split. The brokerage account, split. The commercial property, a small professional building that housed a dental office and 2 suites, would be transferred jointly with the option to sell or manage together. I thought that was straightforward. I was wrong. Dominic hired Whitfield within 2 weeks of the funeral. He didn't tell me. I found out when Whitfield sent a letter to my address asking me to voluntarily relinquish my claim to co-management of the commercial property in exchange for a cash buyout. The number he offered was so low I actually laughed out loud in my apartment, standing in the kitchen in my socks, reading it twice to make sure I hadn't misread. I called Dominic that night. He answered on the 3rd ring with the voice he uses when he's pretending to be reasonable. I'm just trying to simplify things, he said. You don't know anything about property management, Iris. You'd be over your head. I'm trying to protect you. I told him I wasn't interested in being protected. I told him I wanted what Dad left me. He said I was being emotional. I said I'd think about it. I didn't think about it. I started building the case instead. Here's the thing about being underestimated your entire life. You get very good at being invisible. I've had years of practice. When I was in college studying finance, Dominic told people I was majoring in arts or something. When I landed my first real job at a private equity firm at 24, my mother told the family I was doing some office work. When I left that job 3 years later to start investing on my own, quietly, carefully, through a holding company I'd structured with a partner, nobody asked questions because nobody expected anything from me in the first place. That invisibility was, it turned out, my greatest asset. My holding company is called Linden Capital Group. My partner is a woman named Alexis, who I met at a conference in Austin in 2019. We are not flashy. We do not have a website with our names on it. We own 14 properties and our names appear nowhere in the public-facing documents. That's by design. Alexis handles the operations. I handle the acquisitions. We are both very good at what we do. One of those 14 properties is a professional services building in Scottsdale. It is not my father's building, but it is 3 blocks away from it, and it is where Dominic's attorney Whitfield rents his office. I did not know that when we acquired it. I found out 8 months after closing when I was reviewing tenant rolls and saw the name of his firm. I sat very still for a long moment when I saw it. Then I called Alexis and told her, and she was quiet for a second and then said, "Well, that's something." It was something. I didn't know yet exactly what, but I filed it away. The mediation session was Dominic's idea, technically. He'd been pushing for months to resolve the estate outside of litigation. His words, his framing, his attempt to control the setting. I agreed because I wanted to see what he had. What he had, it turned out, was a psychiatric evaluation. I don't mean that metaphorically. He had an actual document, 3 pages, letterhead from a licensed psychologist, dated 4 months earlier, asserting that I demonstrated patterns of impulsive financial decision-making, social withdrawal, and difficulty with long-term planning consistent with an undiagnosed mood disorder. Whitfield slid it across the table like it was nothing. Like he was handing me a menu. I looked at it, I read it. I turned to the 2nd page, then the 3rd. I set it down. I didn't say anything. Dominic was watching me. I could feel it. He wanted a reaction. He'd probably been rehearsing this moment in his head for weeks. Imagined me getting upset, maybe crying, maybe losing composure in front of the mediator. That would have been useful for him. Instead, I picked up my water glass and took a drink. Ms. Okafor, the mediator, looked at me carefully. "Ms. Iris," she said, "do you have a response to this document?" "Not yet," I said. Dominic's jaw tightened slightly. That was the first tell. I didn't call my pulpec. Walami, a virile eritem reducisters opacity to participate meaningfully in joint property ownership. This evaluation supports a petition for limited guardianship over her financial affairs, which we are prepared to file if. Guardianship, I said. It's a protective measure. I heard you. I set the evaluation back on the table, face up, the way you'd leave a card you're done looking at. Dominic leaned forward then. I've known him my whole life, and I know the specific way his face moves when he thinks he's winning. The slight loosening around the jaw, the little exhale through the nose. He was doing both. "Iris," he said, and his voice had that texture, soft, patronizing, the voice of someone being very patient with a difficult child. "This isn't personal. I'm trying to protect Dad's legacy. You've been unstable since the funeral. Anyone who knows you can see it. You need help, not more responsibility." I looked at him for a moment. "Where did you get that evaluation done?" I asked. "A licensed professional." "I'm asking where. Which practice?" Whitfield glanced at Dominic. A half second. Small. "But I saw it. That information isn't relevant to today's proceedings," Whitfield said. "It is to me," I said, "because I'd like to verify the credentials of the clinician who apparently assessed my mental fitness without ever meeting me." The room went quiet. Miss Peril, Okafor's pen, which had been moving in small notes, stopped. "Without ever," she started. "I have never met this psychologist," I said. "I have never filled out any intake paperwork. Never participated in any evaluation. Never consented to any clinical assessment. So either this document is based on secondhand characterizations provided by my brother, which would make it an opinion letter, not a clinical evaluation, and inadmissible in any formal proceeding, or it's fabricated. I don't know which yet, but I will find out." Whitfield's face did something complicated. Dominic's did something worse. "That's a serious allegation," Whitfield said. "It's a serious document," I said. "You introduced it. There's a thing that happens in rooms like that when the balance shifts. It's not dramatic, not the way it is in movies. Nobody gasps. Nobody slams a hand on the table. It's quieter than that. It's the sound of a pen not moving, the sound of someone clearing their throat, the slight rearrangement of bodies in chairs. That's what happened in that conference room." My mother, who had been sitting with her hands in her lap not looking at anyone, looked up at me. My aunt made a small sound that might have been surprise. Dominic looked at Whitfield. Whitfield was looking at the table. Miss Akarafor set down her pen entirely. "I need to take a 5-minute break," she said. It wasn't a question. I went to the hallway. There was a window at the end of it that looked out over the parking lot, and I stood there for a minute watching the heat shimmer off the asphalt. It was July in Scottsdale. It was 108 degrees outside. Everything looked slightly liquid. My phone buzzed. A text from Alexis. "How is it going?" I typed back, "About to get interesting." She sent a thumbs up. I had sent Alexis a message 6 weeks earlier when I first suspected what Dominic was planning. I had asked her to pull everything, the full portfolio summary for Linden Capital, the property addresses, the tenant roles, the ownership structure documentation. She had compiled it into a single PDF, 47 pages, organized and clean. It was in my bag. I hadn't taken it out yet. I went back inside. When the session resumed, Whitfield had apparently decided that the best strategy was to keep moving forward as if the last 20 minutes hadn't happened. He began walking through a prepared presentation, a valuation of the commercial property, a proposed buyout figure, a timeline. Dominic had his arms crossed. He wasn't looking at me. I let Whitfield finish. Then I said, "I have some documents I'd like to share with the group." I took the folder out of my bag and set it on the table. I slid copies to Ms. O'Coffer, to Whitfield, to my mother, to my aunt. I kept a copy in front of me. "This is an overview of Linden Capital Group," I said, "a real estate investment firm in which I hold a 49% ownership stake. We currently manage 14 commercial properties across Arizona, Nevada, and Colorado with a combined assessed value of approximately $31 million. Nobody said anything for a moment. "One of those properties," I continued, "is Ellsworth Professional Center, located at 4822 East Ellsworth Avenue in Scottsdale. It is currently occupied by 3 tenants." I turned to the tenant roll page. The second-floor suite is occupied by the law offices of Whitfield and Crane. I watched Whitfield's face. He looked at the page. He looked at me. He looked at the page again. "Which means," I said, "that my brother's attorney has been paying rent to my company for the past 19 months. And if that creates any concern about Mr. Whitfield's objectivity in advising my brother on matters related to my financial competence, well, I think Ms. O'Coffer can speak to that better than I can." Ms. O'Coffer was already writing. My mother said quietly, "Iris," not like a question, more like she was just saying my name, like she was hearing it for the first time. "I want to be honest about something." I didn't plan for the Whitfield piece to land the way it did. I didn't know it would matter that much. I'd included it because it was true, because full disclosure felt right, and because I suspected it might create a conflict of interest issue that would complicate Whitfield's credibility. I didn't expect it to unravel the whole thing the way it did. But it did. Whitfield requested a recess. He stepped into the hallway with Dominic, and through the glass panel in the conference room door, I could see them talking. Whitfield's hands were moving. Dominic's weren't. His arms were still crossed. His face had gone to a particular kind of still that I recognized. It was the face he made when he was recalculating and hadn't figured out the new number yet. When they came back in, Whitfield cleared his throat. "My client would like to table the guardianship petition at this time," he said. "Withdraw it," Ms. Okafor said. She said it flatly, like she was reading from a list. A pause. "Withdraw it," Whitfield said. "And the psychiatric evaluation," Ms. Okafor said. Another pause. Longer. "We will be investigating the origins of that document," Whitfield said, which was the most careful possible way of saying that something had gone wrong with it and he didn't want to be the one holding it when the investigation started. The estate mediation concluded 3 weeks later. I received my full 50% share, including joint title to the commercial property. Dominic bought out my half at fair market value, the real fair market value determined by an independent appraisal I requested 6 weeks after that. I didn't ask for anything more. I didn't have to. The psychiatric evaluation was later found to be based entirely on notes Dominic had provided to the psychologist, who had, in fact, never met me. The psychologist licensing board was notified. I'm told an inquiry is ongoing. I don't think about it much. It's not my problem to manage. Whitfield quietly relocated his office the following spring. Not to another building I own, I checked, but somewhere across the city, in a newer development off the 101. Good for him. I hope the lease terms are reasonable. My mother called me in September, a few months after everything wrapped up. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind where the light in Phoenix turns orange and everything feels slightly suspended. I was on my back porch with a cup of coffee when she called. I didn't know, she said when I picked up. I know you didn't. About the company. About any of it? She paused. Why didn't you tell us? I thought about how to answer that honestly. I thought about all the years of being arts or something. Of the well-meaning dismissals, the gentle redirection, the automatic assumption that Dominic was the one who understood money and I was the one who needed looking after. I didn't think you'd believe me, I said. She was quiet for a moment. I would have, she said, but her voice had a small uncertainty in it that told me she wasn't completely sure that was true, and I think she heard it too, because she didn't push it. We talked for a while about other things, about my dad, about a trip she was planning to see her sister in Portland, about whether I was eating enough, because she always asks that. Before she hung up, she said, I'm proud of you, Iris. It was a strange thing to hear. Not bad, just strange, like a coat you'd been wanting for a long time that finally arrived and didn't quite fit the way you'd imagined, but was still warm. Thanks, Mom, I said. I sat on the porch for a while after that, watching the light change over the rooftops. Somewhere in the city, in a small professional building 3 blocks from my father's old property, a dental office was open late for a patient who couldn't come in during business hours. The lights were on in the second-floor suite where someone new had moved in. The HVAC system I'd had replaced 2 years ago hummed quietly in the background. I took the last sip of my coffee. It had gone cold, but I didn't mind. I still think about that folder sometimes. 47 pages, clean margins, organized tabs. I carried it in my bag for weeks before I ever took it out. There's something I didn't fully understand until it was all over. That the weight of what you've built quietly is very different from the weight of having to prove it loudly. One is yours. The other is just performance. Dominic made a bet the day he hired that attorney. He bet that I was what he'd always believed me to be, scattered, soft, someone who needed managing. And the thing is, that belief wasn't random. He'd been building it his whole life, reinforcing it every time he talked over me at the dinner table, every time he explained something to me I already knew, every time he told someone in the family I was doing arts or something. He needed me to be small because it made him feel larger. That's not cruelty exactly. It's just a particular kind of smallness that wears confidence as a costume. What he didn't account for was the decade I'd spent doing the work anyway. Not to prove him wrong. I want to be honest about that. In the beginning, I wasn't thinking about him at all. I was just trying to build something real. The clarity came later. The understanding that doing right by yourself, steadily, without needing an audience for it, is its own kind of integrity. You don't always get to see it pay off, but sometimes you do. I've thought about what it actually took to get to that room. Not the documents, not the property portfolio. I mean the other things. The years of learning to read a balance sheet when I was 23 and nobody thought I'd bother. The decision to structure Linden carefully, conservatively, when a flashier approach would have been easier to brag about. The patience to sit in that conference room and not react when Whitfield slid 3 pages across the table claiming I was unstable. That patience wasn't passivity. It was a choice I'd made before I even walked in. That I would not give Dominic the reaction he'd planned for because I didn't owe him a reaction. I owed myself a result. I think about my dad sometimes in this context. He left us equal shares because he believed we were equally capable. I didn't home if he saw Dominic clearly. I didn't know if he saw me clearly either. But his decision, whatever its reasoning, gave me the standing to be in that room. And what I did with that standing was entirely my own. There's a version of this story where I came out swinging from the beginning, hired the biggest attorney I could find, countered every move publicly, made it loud. I considered it, but loud would have required me to expose things before they were ready. Quiet let me build. And when the moment came, quiet turned out to be the most powerful thing in the room. I'm not sure I'd call what happened to Dominic justice exactly. He lost the buyout leverage he'd been counting on. His attorney had a conflict of interest problem that didn't go away quietly. The evaluation he'd commissioned fell apart. Those were the natural consequences of choices he made, not punishments I arranged, not outcomes I engineered beyond protecting what was mine. The difference matters to me. The coffee had gone cold on my back porch that Sunday when my mother called. I didn't reheat it. Some things are fine the way they are.